Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to tackle a pretty serious topic. I think it's very timely considering the documentary that just came out called Shiny Happy People regarding the Duggar family, 19, 20, 21, counting, whatever they are. And it's really sparked a lot of discussion and a lot of just reaction, much of it negative and horrifying. And personally, it had a real impact on me because my uh, cult, my very high control group that I was a part of for 16 years, from the age of 20 to the age of 36, used the same teachings from the IBLP, which is Bill Gothard's ministry, and also very prominent in our group. And I know also the IBLP and the Duggar family, they used the teachings of Debbie and Michael Pearl for child training. And I remember having the entire curriculum, workbooks, seminars, all kinds of things surrounding that. And it is very disturbing, I think, to me at least. And I know probably to all you in SBTV land, but I would like to call attention to it and delve into it a little bit. I have a couple of disclaimers I would like to say. And the first one being there's some pretty heavy topics that we'll discuss and you know surrounding child training, discipline, very extreme fundamental views and practices that will probably be disturbing to most. So if that's something that you would find very upsetting, please take care and take caution. And the second disclaimer I would like to say is that I am in no way saying that Christianity in itself is a cult. I don't believe it is. Fundamentalism tends to take things to the extreme, and there is a rampant amount of abuse in many of those circles. So I do take issue with extreme religious practices, which we'll discuss today. So let's get into it. So the book that I would like to talk about today, this is an old copy of it. This is the copy that is like the one I had. I burned all my books, but I did get a hold of a original version. This is called, if you can see it, it's called To Train Up a Child. And you see there's a horse and buggy. And take note of the horse there, oop, right there. So that is by Deb. It's their name, last name, because I think of a different for this. Is it a gem? So I'll start with just a little excerpt from the introduction, just to give you an idea of how they start out. So they're talking about the truths as they see it, the truth of raising children from the Bible, and they say their interpretation of the Bible. Let's just say, and they say these truths are not new, deep insights from the professional world of research, but rather the same principles that the Amish use to train their stubborn mules, and the same technique that God uses to train his children. So, right out of the gate, uh, Mr. Pearl is saying that he's not taking these teachings from he's not gleaning anything from any modern professional research, any experts in child psychology or child training. He's taking it from what he believes is his interpretation of how God treats his children and how the Amish trains their stubborn mules. So, and then he goes on to say, in the first chapter about obedience training. He says, most parents don't think that they can train their little children. Training doesn't necessarily require that the trainee be capable of reason. Even mice and rats can be trained to respond to stimuli. Careful training can make a dog perfectly obedient. So we're likening children to training mules and rats and mice and dogs. And I can tell you as we go on, and I think you'll agree, I wouldn't treat my dog like this. I would not. And then he goes on to compare a family to the military. And he's saying things like barking orders at your children, attention, 10 hut, and I quote, to the rear march, translated into family language, would be leave the room or go to bed. Without question, they would turn and go. This is normal in the well trained family. This is normal. Not. And then he goes on even further to talk about a few pages about training horses and breaking horses. So he starts by talking about how it's never too early to train or discipline your child. And before they even have a chance to do anything willfully wrong or bad, you need to train them into submission because they were born supposedly bad with a sinful nature. And just as an aside, we know that Scientology doesn't really believe in children in a way. They believe that a child is a Thetan who is just basically reincarnated and they are big beings in little bodies. Now, fundamental Christianity believes that you were born with a sinful nature, you're bad, and you need to be broken, and you need to be basically beaten into submission and looked at as something to conquer and to break and to mold into what you want or what God wants, I should say. Yeah, okay. So they're talking about infants. So even newborns supposedly need to be trained. So you bring this beautiful baby home from the hospital. You're just so thrilled to have this just cute little cherub. And you go to bond with it. And if you're a nursing mom, you're trying to bond and latch on and things. And the baby bites down. And they say that when they do that, you pull their hair. You inflict pain on them to get them to stop because that's how you have to train them. It goes on. So as young as 6 months, they have a couple of delightful little games that they play with their children. And I know from watching Shiny Happy People that Michelle Duggar did this, and she made it sound so sweet, and it's just so wonderful, and we just do this together, and oh, they just love it. So they have something called blanket training, and I'm not making this up, folks. I'm not making this up. So as young as 6 months, they put their baby on a blanket in the middle of the room or wherever, and this is at least 5 minutes to 30 minutes, several times a day it can be. I know Michelle said she did it several times a day. You you sit your baby on a blanket and you put their favorite toy just out of reach. And when they go to reach for their favorite toy, you hit them with a switch. Now, I don't like going in the woods, so I was not gonna go out in the woods and get no 12 by 1 inch branch. But this is a wooden spoon. This is one of the instruments that my cult said to use. And this is 12-inch by half inch. So they say 12-inch by a whole inch, which is anything's bad. Okay. So they used that for their 3-year-old who tried to go up the stairs and they would wrap their child with that instrument. And eventually they stopped. Um, they don't have baby gates? I mean, okay. Yeah, right? So, the other thing is to put their favorite toy on a coffee table and do the same thing, and they just make it sound so wonderful. So I just as a test, I took this and kinda hit myself with it a couple times, harder, soft and then hard, and I was like, "Ouch." And my husband's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "This effing hurts. This is terrible." And he just kinda backed up, and I was just like, "Didn't I tell you? Didn't you promise me you were gonna empty the trash?" No, just kidding, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's such a serious subject. I'm having a hard time with it, so I cracked a joke. I apologize. It's not funny. It's not funny at all. So, yeah, so never too young to train them, which is just awful. And you're made to feel like a terrible parent in these groups if you don't do that. So this is how their attitude, they want children to have a perfect sweet little attitude, but this is how their attitude is towards children. They're talking about not liking your kids. There's nothing cute or lovable about a whining brat. To allow a child to whine and disobey is to mold a personality and character that you will eventually find hard to like. By taking control and teaching them to control their emotions and to instantly obey, your children will be cheerful and pleasant. Then you will not only love your children, but like them as well. The child reciprocates the person. I'm sorry. This is hard to read. It's a little dark too, so I'm trying not to have too much light, but the child reciprocates the parents' delight by loving and honoring them even more. They can both enjoy each other's company. The parents are rested and refreshed by spending time with their children. So this is just making a really horrific thing sound good and making parents who have, compassion, empathy, and want to just love their children and make them feel wanted as the bad people. It's just sick. It's just sick. And so we're gonna get some more delightful things. I promise I'm gonna try to get through this as quickly as possible, but still get the point across. And so in chapter 5, they're talking about sparing the rod, spoiling the child. You probably heard that saying. It's from Proverbs 13:24, which again is the Old Testament. They did some pretty brutal things in the Old Testament. It says, "He that spareth the rod, hates their son, but he that loveth him chastises him diligently." Okay. And then his commentary is what God says goes exactly opposite of the quote feelings of many parents and educators. The passage clearly states that a failure to apply the rod is due to the parents' hating of the child. Yeah. So you're just being accused of hating your children if you don't brutalize them. It's awful. And he likens the rod as says that it's like a magic wand. So we're making it sound so wonderful. Don't think of don't think of the rod as a weapon of defense or a show of force. Think of it more as a magic wand. The first time parents see its restorative powers, they are amazed. I still marvel at the power of the little rod. Somehow, after 8 or 10 licks with the rod, the poison in your child is transformed into gushing love and contentment. Does it sound like Michelle Duggar to you? Kind of does to me. That's why I'm sort of reading it out like a little bit in her voice. I can't help it. It's just coming out. The world becomes a beautiful place. A brand new child emerges. It makes an adult stare at the rod in wonder, trying to see what magic is contained therein. God would not have commanded parents to use the rod if it were not for the good of the child. And he goes on to specifically say how to apply the rod. And basically, it says the child should be able to anticipate the coming of the rod by your utterly calm, controlled spirit. And it calls the place of discipline the place of cleansing. And it basically says that if your child doesn't obey and you tell them that they will have discipline, the rod, then you just go through with it. Even if they start obeying right away, nope, you just bring them. If you have to sit on them, sit on them. If you have to drag them, if you have to subdue them in any way possible. And this is, as I quote, it says, prove that you are bigger, tougher, and more patiently enduring and are unmoved by his wailing. So, if you look at the thumbnail, I don't have a picture of Mr. Pearl to hold up. He's a big guy, big guy. You can see in the picture of the thumbnail. And, well, congratulations. You're this big guy and you're going to show what a tough guy you are, how you're powerful over a tiny, tiny little defenseless child. Just not good, sick, bad. All right. Oh, okay. So I'm going to kind of skim over some of these things. I just want to give you an overall view of some of the other um, incredibly messed up things that this book to train up a child. I think it would be more appropriately named to train up an automaton and a child that fears you. But anyways, so they start talking about nap time and bedtime with your child, even little babies. So I don't see anything about lullabies or book reading or soft music or gentle reassurance. It says to settle them down. Let's see. To get to get up is on wait. So don't let them get up. And okay, to get up is to be on the firing line and to be switched back down. So they're saying if the child tries to get up from bed and it's not time to get up, they get switched to lay back down. It will become as easy as putting a rag doll to bed. Those who are mostly consistent must use the switch more often, but those who are always consistent will not need it anymore. So you hit them to get them to settle down. Oh, that I'm sure that makes them really peaceful and want to go to sleep. Sounds more like they're beating them into submission and causing disassociation where they probably just pass out from not being able to face what's going on is what it sounds like to me. And a couple other little pearls, not pearls, but they talk about infant potty training as young as 3 months old. And if your child soils themselves, you bring them outside and you take the garden hose and you hose them down. So that's just lovely. And folks, I'm not talking about just one fringe group. I'm talking about millions of children that have had this book implemented. They've the Pearls have sold two over 2 million copies of their books, not just this book, but their ministry that they call No Greater Joy. And it's not just one denomination, it's used over many fundamental groups. So we've got the Duggars are Baptist, fundamental Baptist, not just Baptist. So, if you're Baptist, I'm not talking about you probably, most likely. If I am, you wanna GTF all of that out of there, okay? Um, and, many non-denominational, IBLP with Bill Gothard is non-denominational, and so were the Pearls, so they could just push it to whatever group, whatever denomination would accept it. My church growing up did believe in some of these principles, not to the extreme of this, but it was a Pentecostal church, more of a mainstream Assemblies of God that was more charismatic and evangelical. But as I got older and got into the other group, that was an offshoot of the Pentecostal church, it was more of a fundamental, and our minister had gone to many of Bill Gothard's seminars and got a hold of this, and this was the Bible of discipline. So I'll talk a little bit about what happened with that with myself and my family, but I just want to get through a couple more points. It talks about having, like, basically enforcing your child to have a cheerful attitude, to go to their area of cleansing willingly, and even say thank you and give hugs and say how wonderful your parents are for doing this to you. And chapter 14, and let's see if you can see it because I want to prove that this is the says emotional control. And there's also a nice little pleasant chapter, I think it's chapter 12. It's entitled Child Labor. And both of these things are supposed to be good. So um, I just think bite model, bite model. I don't know if Stephen Hassan has read this book, but if he hasn't, he really should. I'm sure he has. I'm sure he has. But yeah, emotional control. It says, do not comfort your children. For your child's own sake, teach them to maintain control of their emotions. If you do not want to produce sissies who use adversity as a chance to get attention, then don't program them that way. When your toddler falls on the floor, don't pick them up. Don't speak to them in alarmed, sympathetic voice. And don't say, poor thing, does it hurt? So you're just supposed to ignore them, have them brush it off and suck it up, and don't be a sissy. And he goes on to talk about how he treats teenagers as well. And it's called Tough Teens. So yeah, it's just awful. And in addition, like I mentioned, the child labor, having them cheerfully work as adults and alongside of adults, and they want them to just be little soldiers. And also, the last chapter is entitled Homeschooling. So let's isolate them as well. And then there's really not much oversight by the government. So this is how they get away with it. And all of these things were definitely something that my husband and I had been confronted by and had to come to terms with ourselves. And we did homeschool for a few years until we left the cult. My oldest, was 9, and my boys were 5 and 6. And when I had my children, I was just so happy. I had never really felt like I belonged anywhere. I never really felt like I had a real family. And here I had these 3 precious kids that were just entrusted into my care, and I wanted them to feel loved and belong and just cherished. And then this came about. So I can say, fortunately, I refused to do the blanket training and the switching, all that stuff when they were young, really babies up to toddlers. When they were a little bit older, I did used a spoon a couple times. They joke my kids joke about it now, they're in their 20s, and they joke about how they would put, pillows in their pants, books, or something. And, it's not something I'm proud of, and I've apologized to them many times. I just I won't say I didn't know better. I won't say I don't have an excuse, but they're alive. We have a great relationship. I'm willing to admit that there were things that I made mistakes, and I'm just happy to have my family back from that awful, awful place. And I hope that you maybe learned something today. And I would love for you to leave a comment or even a question. If you have any more things you'd like to share with me that you don't want to put in the comments, feel free to email me. It's coffeecultsandcrafts@gmail.com. And if you could like and subscribe if you haven't, I would really appreciate that too. Thank you all for bearing with me, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Hopefully, it'll be a lighter subject next time. Bye. Have a great day. Bye bye.